But phones turned us on to Stockhausen and Cage as well, and that led us to get interested in Faust, I suppose, and some of the German bands like Can, and we found out that some of Can had studied with Stockhausen, of course, and that took us into some interesting areas. So we started exploring sound in its pure state, sound for sound's sake, and individually and collectively we'd just examine the sounds that objects made, not musical instruments, objects, and creating strange soundscapes like I remember Epic would occasionally, when there was no one in the house, when the parents went out, he'd do something very strange with the taps, the plumbing. He'd turn all the taps on upstairs and then run down and turn all the taps on downstairs, and then run back upstairs, turn the taps off again and create an airlock in the pipes, and then create this fantastic rhythm with an airlock in the pipes, and we'd record that. Wow, that sounds amazing, yeah. And sometimes we'd join in and sort of bang things, and it's a good thing that the whole house didn't explode, really, or this flood. We were quite lucky to get away with that, really.
Remember read about Seymour, like the individual experiences of, what do you remember from those times?
We borrowed 2 cars to go down to Cambridge. Cambridge seemed to be the only place which was affordable, and it was about 150 miles or something ridiculous, and we had to get up before dawn to get there. It was ridiculous, really. I'm sure we could have found somewhere closer, but I think we used it because it had a reputation for doing unusual stuff, and it was fairly cheap.
Who else had recorded there?
Oh, I can't remember. Some rubbish, But it's cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
Cheap and cheerful is good. And we treated it like sort of turning on a cassette machine, We said, all right, well, we've set up now, and press the go button, please, and we'll start. But he said, oh, it's not that simple, I've got to set up all these microphones. I mean, before, we just had one microphone, or a built-in microphone on a cassette machine, and you put it in the middle of the room, so everybody's noise could be heard. And we were rather puzzled, he kept getting all these microphones out, and we thought, what's he doing? All these microphones, what's all that about? And we had to wait until later to do the singing, and that was a bit of a strange idea, but we found out that you could make as much noise as you could, and later record the singing so it could be heard above all the din. So you could turn all the amplifiers up. That's great, yeah.
What do you remember about the reaction when the single came out?
Well, at that point, we were still getting used to the idea that we were making a sound with relatively conventional instruments. And occasionally, just occasionally, it sounded like almost like a proper band, like we'd heard on the radio, but not always. And due to the strange stew of influences, we didn't want to stray too far into being like a professional proper band, because that was a bit naff, that was a bit sort of that wasn't really desirable. That was a bit boring, really,
Cool.
So, well, if you want to put it like that, yes. Yeah. We had only sketchy notions of what people would refer to as being cool or not. We didn't really worry about that too much, really.
But did you guys rehearse before you went in there? Did you have the songs nailed down, or?
Well, rehearsing, you see, that was a bit of a sore point, because We didn't really rehearse at all.
You just played.
We just played. We just got together and played. Sometimes we'd improvise, and sometimes we'd just make noises. Well, I got lumbered with the name Jowhead. I think it might have been a combination of Nicky and Epic, sort of spun that one together. It was a sort of corruption of Brummie speak. Brummie being the local city, Birmingham, and Brummies would have this particular avuncular accent, and Jowhead is a sort of argot or a vernacular for somebody who wasn't quite right in the head, you know, and they thought this was very amusing to call me that. And it sort of stuck, really, and I don't mind it, really, you know.
It's catchy.
I've tried to shake it off a couple of times, but it won't go away.
It's so catchy, it's hard to forget.
Yes, it's true. And there are all sorts of variations on it. People in Germany call me Jowie, which is okay.
That's right, and you were mentioning earlier that you didn't have the heart to actually correct the Germans when they actually mispronounced it.
Jowie's a rather nice variation, I don't mind. And I tried to, when we started the House Hunters, I tried to find a new identity as Stefan Vogel, but it didn't catch on. It was back to Jowhead again.
Vogel's Bird, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I was born with the name Stephen Bird, so it was a corruption of that.
Had you guys been playing any gigs out at that point?
Oh, no.
So you without playing gigs, you decided you wanted to make a record, kind of?
Playing concerts seemed to be rather a superfluous sort of idea at first, and we didn't actually play our first gig until after we'd been in the studio. But there was some new wave type festival happening in Birmingham, which we got wind of, and so we invited ourselves along to it and played 3 songs perhaps, and it didn't seem to go down very well because we didn't look like archetypal sort of punks, because it was still in its infancy, the early punk rock movement, and I had this sort of tatty haircut, you know. I didn't have it all shaved off like all the rest of them did, and it was a strange assortment of materials. People were sort of checking each other out and wondering how they should behave and how they should look, and you know, should we spit at the band, and should we be violent, you know, should we nut somebody, should we kick the bar staff or something like this. People didn't really know how to behave. The people were wondering about the social aspects of this, and how to dress, you know. I just showed up in some things I probably pilfered from my the female members of my family, you know. I like to be a little flamboyant within and Adrian, or Nicky as he became known, he was by then making trips down to London to work at a souvenir shop, that's right, and I'd go down and join him sometimes and hang out with him, and he'd get clothes from Malcolm McLaren's shop in the King's Road, the sex shop, or Sedition as it became later known, and he came up occasionally with these trendy modern threads, you know. And I used to try and emulate this by going to jumble sales and getting these way out looking garments, which were invariably female in origin, but I thought they looked rather interesting. And my mother recently was reminiscing. She said, "Oh, what you used to wear," and she was saying about how I used to wear a purple tailcoat, sort of walking down to the village shop and things like that, and a top hat or something. I just used to go to jumble sales and pick up the most ridiculous things I could find, which caused a few raised eyebrows in this rather sedate suburban backwater that we lived in.
You were talking about how the first Swell Map show didn't really go so well in terms of the reaction, I think. Well, when did things start to change in that respect, where the audiences really started to get what you guys were about? Do you sort of recall a sort of shift happening when you guys would start playing live and then the audience would, you could really feel that the audience was getting what you guys were about?
Well, we weren't really like the other bands emerging at the time, because most of them were going on about, oh, we're on the dole, you know, and moany bands. Lots of the early punk bands were just copying the Sex Pistols and the Clash, or what they'd read about them, you know, and they were sort of saying, oh, we got nothing, we're on the dole, and we got no future, you know, this sort of thing. But we had a more perhaps individual approach to subject matter in lyrics, and the choices of subject matter for songs wasn't really specific to social issues and that kind of thing. So I'd often write things with sort of cut up newspaper headlines, things like that. Bronze and Baby Shoes, that's how that couple came about. Those bits cut out of newspapers and pasted together, basically. And Nicky's early lyrics were very quirky as well. Some of them were some of them used his interest in military history, for example. Blenheim Shots that comes to mind, you know, there's some strange fragmentary things about ancient battles, and the first Swell Map single A-side, Read About Seymour, that was about some colourful mod figure, you know, in the 1960s, which wasn't
Seymour Stein, the actual label guy.
Seymour Stein said it was about him, but that was rubbish. He was boasting. It's true. No, it's
That's
about
a great boast.
well,
Swell Maps wrote a single about me.
yes, not much of a great claim.